Welcome to a video from Synthesizer.com. In this video I'm going to look at some of my tips for creating analog sounds on the Korg Wavestate. When I did a similar video on the mod wave, that synth is really suited for creating analog sounds because of its architecture. It's got traditional subtractive synthesis architecture as well as wavetables, and you can really create some nice analog sounds using all the modulation routines that you can do on a mod wave. On the Wavestate, it's a little different. It's a different instrument, similar filters, but a very different instrument. But you can still create some really nice, warm, interesting analog sounds on it, as well as creating very complex digital sounds and sequences and wave sequences. And so it's a very complex instrument. But what I'm going to look at in this video is how I can recreate analog sounds. So the reason I'm doing the video is because I created the Genesis set for the Wavestate, and a couple of people asked me how I go about choosing that, what samples did I use, how did I go about choosing samples. So I thought I'd do a video showing the thought processes behind that. So I've got my Wavestate module hooked up here. It's actually being controlled by the mod wave. The key stage is on the other side of the room, so I'm kind of stretching myself to record this, so I'm doing it on here. So what I thought I'd do is I'll start from an initial program and we'll create that kind of sound and so other analog type sounds. Another one will be perhaps the brass sound. And we'll have a look at how I do those. So I'm going to start with an empty performance. You can hear that's sort of the basic pattern in there. So I was going to start with an empty performance. There's two starting points on a Wavestate. You can start with just a sample and then do modulation on it, or you can start with the timing wave sequencing lanes and do some really interesting things with that. I'm going to use both methods, but for now I'm just going to go with a simple. Let's start with layer A. I'm just going to, first example I'll just start with a single multi-sample. So it's creating that analog sort of lead sound, that follow you, follow me type sound. The question was, how do you choose the samples? If you go into it and here, you can see there's an awful lot of samples to choose from, and where do you start? So probably my starting point is always the instrument that I'm trying to recreate. So follow you, follow me, ARP Pro Soloist, Art Pro Soloist, and analog mono synth used by Tony Banks of Genesis in the 70s. So yeah, I kind of start there. If I was doing something like a Jan Hammer Mini Moog lead sound, I would think, okay, I need to start like from that point. If I was doing something like the Behind the Lines, I think it's either a Prophet 5 or Prophet 10, or it could be a CS80. So if I was doing a Vangelis sound, that would be a CS80. So I kind of think that way, and I think, look at what samples I've got to choose from. I said there's an awful lot. Where if you go to the sort of synth category, you can see, so there you can see I've got all these bass and I've got the lead sound. So that lead MG Moog 700S Korg 700 Mini Korg 700S. We've got some Poly 61s, we've got some Prophet 5s. You can see we've got all these in there, and then there's all these others to choose from as well. And there's some waveforms in there as well. If you go to lead section, you can see we've got these leads. We've got the DWGS, which are the digital wave generated system. That's the used on the MS2000, but it originates from the DW8000 type range. We've got loads of pulse widths, which we'll come back to, sawtooth, squared. So you can see, and all these WS ones are from the wave station as well. So you can see we've got loads of starting points to choose from. So let's just create that sort of nice sawtooth type sound. So we've got a few to choose from here. These are all the sawtooths we've got. We've got Rhodes Chroma, Sawtooth, 2600, Moog, Oberheim, Prophet 5. So you can choose your flavor, and you've got sawtooths going down, sawtooths going up as well. I'm going to use the 2600 one. I found that the one that just my ear likes, so let's just choose that one for now. Okay, just to give you a comparison, I'm going to fire up the mod wave, switch the I'll switch the mix around. I'm going to go to init performance on the mod wave. So now you're hearing a mod wave. And I can show you the waveform. We're using the sawtooth there. So that's the sawtooth of the mod wave. And that's the go down an octave. That's the sawtooth that we're using there. So you can see it. Our basic starting points are actually pretty similar, despite this being a sample of a sawtooth and the other one being an actual sawtooth generated by the oscillators. Now the mod wave gives you loads of modulation routines, but we can still do some interesting things in here. Of course, we've got this filter section which applies to all the samples, so we'll be looking at that as well. But so once I've got my first sawtooth on there, there's a few things you can do to really warm up that sound. You've got 4 layers, so you've got a lot of flexibility with layers to do. So we're on a single layer at the moment. So the first thing you could do is dual detune. So you could have 2 oscillators running slightly out of tune with each other. So let me just show you what I mean by that. So we'll go with that 2600 waveform again. So I'm just going to switch to layer B. So you can see I'm on layer B there. So there's the other one. So what I could do is just tune that slightly down, maybe a couple, 0.2, and go back to layer A. I'll switch that on, go back to 0.2 as well. So that would be the same as if you had a dual oscillator synth. So I quite like that. Another way of doing that though, without using your 4 layers up, is just add a bit of unison, 2 voices and a bit of detune. So using those 2 layers, I often use that to do maybe an octave span or something like that, which you can't do using the detune option. So detune is quite good for that. The other option, you've got this random there, which just adds a little bit of randomness to it. You won't always hear it, but it's there in the background. The other thing I like to do as well is just add a little bit of modulation to it. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit of pitch modulation. So there we go. It's just a tiny bit. Now there's a couple of different ways options we've got with the LFOs. We could leave that. So I could leave that as it is now with the being re-triggered each time I go on it. Or I could go into sync notes, put it free running, and if I do it as free running, then it doesn't get restarted. Okay, if I make it more extreme, if you get into the Vangelis area, so we'll come back to that one. So there's our basic oscillator. So choose your sample, get your pitch right, and then we'll move on to filters. Incidentally, if I just choose some of these other ones, you can hear the difference. It's subtle, but there is a difference. I don't know that you'll be able to tell between up and down. You can't, but if you combine them, it'd be interesting. I'm going to leave it on that one. So now we need to look at the filter. So this is where you shape the characteristic of the sound. We've got a lot of different filters to choose from. I found the Poly 6 quite a nice sort of warm filter, clean filter. The MS-20, especially when you start driving, it gives you a harsher sounding filter. The 4-pole filter is, if I'm often trying to recreate the Juno type and Roland type effects, the sounds, I use the 4-pole. And of course you've got low and high pass filter, and then you've got this brilliant combination filter, multi-filter, where you can have 2 different filters and you can have all these combinations. So you can have a low pass and a high pass, and you can sweep between them through the crossfades. But you could also have a band pass and a high pass combined with a low pass, high pass, and band pass, and sweep between them. So you've got real flexibility on that. So let's put it into mono. Legato mode means it doesn't re-trigger. So if you hear this with off, and probably what we should do at this point is do the envelopes, but that's without legato. With it on, which is how most mono synths tend to work. So it's not restarting the envelopes again. We should look at the envelopes. So envelope for our lead sound. If we're creating a Vangelis type poly sound, we want to introduce it nice and slowly, we can add some slower attack time and slower release time. For our lead sounder, I'm going to go with a fairly sharp attack and not much decay and a bit of release. Now when it comes to the filter, we've been having just the filter open, but what I can do is turn the filter down, and you've got the filter intensity, and then that is using this filter shape then. So you can see the shape of the filter as I've got it on the envelope there. Now straight away you've got that nice analog sound as the filters are opening up there, and that's controlled by the intensity. Now for that Genesis sound I would probably have less envelope on it. So I'll probably turn that intensity down a bit. But for creativity, for the sake of showing you this, I actually quite like that. So if you get that, so I'm going to leave it there. And of course the envelopes aren't being re-triggered because we're in legato mode. So we've got a nice sort of analog sounding sound there. So I could play about those filters. We have got some other options as well. So if you're using resonance, if I put it into, so you can see you can really change the resonance. So you can hear the different filters have different ways of treatment. So I'm going to stick to just to my ear. I like that sound. Okay, so I've got the filter kind of on there now. If I mention that randomness, if I just flick it all the way up, you'll see it sounds like it's out of tune. So you want to use that subtly. Now the other thing you want to do really with kind of analog is a bit of movement on it. So I think what I'll do is I'm going to apply a bit of LFO to the filter, just a little bit. So if I go to the LFO filter, I've got this set as free running, so just like I did with the pitch one. You can hear that. So it all just adds to a bit of movement on there. Now for that Genesis sound I would need some portamento. Let's make it finger. There we go, so that's a nice bit of portamento. So that's got the first part of it now, and now we can go into some effects. Put a bit of chorus on it, which I might not use actually for the Genesis kind of sound, but I'll show you as examples. And then once you start adding your delays, maybe, and this is where you just tweak the envelope, perhaps slightly less bright. And then the other things that I might do to that is add some poly aftertouch and mod control. So you could do it for tuning, but what I'm going to do is add the poly aftertouch to the filter just ever so slightly, and also do the exact same thing with the mod wheel as well. So if I go up to my key stage and actually I need that value a lot higher, don't I? So let's get it into the 30s. So there we go. So I've created a mono lead sound there. Pretty straightforward really. There's just a few tricks. Movement is kind of the key, I think, with that one. So let me just save that one. So I'll save that one, and then I'll make these available as a download from the digitallifestyle.com to go with this video. So I'm just saving that layer now. And so we've got these three other layers, so you could create split points and strings in the background, rhythms, sequences, you know, but I'm just going to go and open that lead up. So I'm going to load that lead now on the second layer, turn off and go back to the first layer. So there we are, we've still got that. Now if we play both together, you won't hear a huge amount, apart from you've got two voices, you've got four voices. But you could just do things like, I'm just going to stick this up an octave. So then you're emulating a dual oscillator synth with, and you can switch, you know, oscillator 1 to 1 octave, oscillator 2 to another. And if you want to emulate a 3 octave synth, 3 oscillator synth, you could load another layer in and have that on another oscillator as well. So you can easily do that kind of thing. But of course, they're independent sounds as well. So there's nothing to stop you. Make that pitch LFO. Maybe let's just change the frequency slightly. And we could change the filter type. So now those two layers